Crash! The sound of a fist hammering my front door at 7 a.m. jolted me awake, my coffee splashing across the kitchen counter like a crime scene. I stumbled to the door, still in my flannel pajama pants, to find Karen, the HOA president, standing on my porch like a general ready for war. Her face was beet red, her eyes narrowed to slits, and she clutched a crumpled copy of the HOA bylaws like it was the Constitution itself. "You've got some nerve," she bellowed, jabbing a manicured finger toward my newly painted ranch gate. "That hideous red gate is a disgrace to this community. Repaint it beige by tomorrow, or you're slapped with a $500 fine." I live on a 10-acre ranch just outside town, where the rolling hills and open skies feel like freedom itself. My gate, a vibrant crimson to match the barn I'd restored last summer, had been up for exactly 6 days. It was a statement, my way, of saying this land was mine, not some cookie-cutter suburb. But to Karen, it was a personal insult. I leaned against the doorframe, sipping what was left of my coffee, and drawled, "Karen, it's my property, my gate, red stays." Her jaw dropped, then snapped shut like a steel trap. She sputtered, "You'll regret this," before storming back to her pristine SUV, leaving a trail of dust and fury. This wasn't just about a gate. It was about control. Karen had been the self-appointed queen of our rural community for years, wielding her HOA clipboard like a scepter. She'd fined Old Man Jenkins for his unkempt wildflower garden, harassed the Millers over their non-compliant mailbox shape, and even tried to dictate how many chickens Mrs. Rodriguez could keep. My ranch, one of the last holdouts, against her beige tyranny, was her obsession. Most folks in our neighborhood, technically under the HOA's jurisdiction but spread across large lots, tolerated her because it was easier than fighting. Not me. I'd grown up on this land, inherited it from my granddad, who'd have laughed Karen off with a wave of his Stetson. That gate was my line in the sand. I watched her SUV peel out, tires crunching gravel, and knew this was only round one. Karen wasn't the type to back down. She'd come back with more notices, more threats, maybe even the sheriff. I grinned, already picturing my next move. My old John Deere tractor, parked by the gate for a week while I worked on a fence, was about to become more than just farm equipment. Karen had no idea who she was messing with. As I cleaned up the coffee spill, my phone buzzed. It was Jake, my buddy who runs the feed store in town. "Heard Karen lost her mind over your gate," he said, chuckling. "You gonna fight this?" I told him about the confrontation and he whooped. "Paint the whole damn house red while you're at it," he said. I laughed, but the idea stuck. This wasn't just my fight anymore. It was a chance to push back for everyone Karen had bullied. I glanced out the window at my gate, glowing like a ruby in the morning sun. It wasn't just paint. It was a rebellion. By noon, the Great Red Gate debate had exploded across our small community like a spark in a dry hayfield. My phone buzzed nonstop with texts, calls, and even a few memes from neighbors who'd caught wind of Karen's morning meltdown. Mrs. Rodriguez, who lived a mile down the road and kept a flock of chickens Karen had once tried to outlaw, sent me a photo of her prize hen, Dolores, with the caption, "Dolores says keep the gate red." I laughed, picturing Karen's face, if she saw that. My buddy Jake, who runs the feed store in town, called me up, his voice crackling with excitement. "Man, you're a legend already," he said. "Heard Karen's telling everyone you're ruining property values. You gonna fight this or what?" I told him about her threat of a $500 fine, and he whooped. "Paint the whole damn house red while you're at it. I'll bring my drone to record the chaos." Jake wasn't kidding about the drone. He'd been itching to use it since he bought it for farm surveillance, though we all knew he just liked buzzing it over his cornfields to freak out the crows. I could already see this turning into content for my YouTube channel, where I posted videos about ranch life, fixing fences, tuning up my tractor, or sharing stories about my granddad's old roping tricks. My audience, mostly folks who loved the rural vibe, would eat up a showdown with an overzealous HOA president. "Get that drone ready," I told Jake. This is gonna be a saga. Karen, meanwhile, was on the warpath. By mid-afternoon, a certified letter arrived at my doorstep, delivered by a nervous-looking mail carrier who muttered, "Good luck, man." The envelope contained an official HOA violation notice, printed on letterhead so fancy it probably cost more than my gate paint. The non-compliant gate color violates Section 3.2.1 of the HOA bylaws, it declared, citing a vague rule about maintaining aesthetic harmony. It demanded I repaint the gate beige by Friday, 2 days away, or face escalating fines, starting at $500 and climbing to $2,000 if I didn't comply within a week. The letter ended with a typed signature from Karen, her name underlined twice for emphasis. I rolled my eyes. She'd clearly spent hours crafting this masterpiece of bureaucratic bullying. But Karen wasn't done. She'd also announced an emergency neighborhood beautification meeting for Thursday night at the community center, a squat building with peeling paint she somehow never noticed when nitpicking everyone else's property. The meeting's agenda, posted on the HOA's rarely updated website, was crystal clear. Discussion of non-compliant property modifications, specifically the garish red gate at 472 Willow Creek Road. That was my address. She'd named and shamed me like I was a criminal for daring to paint my own gate. I decided right then I'd show up, not to beg for mercy, but to throw her power trip back in her face. Thursday evening, I pulled on my cleanest flannel shirt and cowboy boots, grabbed a thermos of coffee, and drove my pickup to the community center. The parking lot was fuller than I'd expected, with about 20 neighbors milling around, some clutching paper cups of bad coffee, others whispering nervously like they were at a funeral. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed as Karen stood at a podium, her clipboard stacked with notes. She launched into a tirade about how my gate was an assault on our community's values and a threat to property values. She even had a PowerPoint slide with a blurry photo of my gate next to a stock image of a beige one labeled appropriate. The room was silent, except for the occasional cough or chair squeak. I waited until she paused for dramatic effect, then stood up, my boots clicking on the linoleum floor. Every head turned. "Karen," I said, calm as a summer breeze, "my gate's on my land, not yours. It's not hurting anyone, and it matches my barn. If you don't like it, don't drive by." The room erupted, half in shocked gasps, half in stifled laughter. Old man Jenkins, sitting in the back, clapped so loud his hearing aid squealed. Karen's face turned the exact shade of my gate, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "This is about standards," she finally snapped. "You're not special, and you don't get to break the rules." "Rules?" I shot back. "You're out here measuring mailboxes and counting chickens. Maybe focus on fixing the potholes on Willow Creek instead." A few neighbors nodded, and Mrs. Rodriguez called out, "Yeah, Karen, where's my culvert repair?" The meeting spiraled into chaos, with Karen banging her gavel and shouting for order. I sat down, smirking. I'd lit the fuse. That night, I got home to find a sticky note slapped on my gate. "Change it or else." Karen's loopy handwriting was unmistakable, and the threat felt personal. She was escalating, but I wasn't worried. My John Deere tractor, still parked by the gate from a fence repair job, was about to become my ace in the hole. I texted Jake, "Drone ready for tomorrow?" He replied with a thumbs-up emoji and a clip art tractor. Game on. Thursday morning dawned crisp and clear, the kind of day where the sun paints the hills gold, and you can smell the dew on the grass. I was out by the barn, checking my fence posts, when I heard the crunch of gravel from the road. Peering through the morning haze, I saw Karen's SUV leading a small convoy, 2 other cars, one driven by her loyal sidekick, HOA treasurer Linda, and the other by a nervous-looking board member named Greg, who always seemed like he'd rather be fishing than dealing with Karen's crusades. They parked just outside my gate, right on the edge of my property line, and spilled out like a SWAT team on a mission. Karen, clipboard in hand, was in full battle mode. her khaki capris and sensible loafers, a stark contrast to the tape measure and camera she wielded like weapons. "We're documenting this violation," she barked when she spotted me, her voice carrying over the chirping birds. Linda was furiously scribbling notes, while Greg fumbled with a digital camera, zooming in on my crimson gate like it was evidence in a murder trial. I sauntered over, my cowboy hat tilted just enough to shade my eyes, and leaned against my John Deere tractor, which had been parked by the gate for a week while I worked on the fence. Its green paint was chipped, but the engine purred like a contented cat when I gave it a pat. "Y'all sure you want to play this game?" I asked, keeping my tone light but letting a hint of steel creep in. Karen scoffed, her lips curling into a smug smirk. "You're not above the rules," she snapped, stepping closer to the gate and pointing at it like it had personally offended her. "This eyesore is a blight on our community, and we're building a case to force compliance. You'll repaint it, or you'll pay." I let her words hang in the air for a moment, the only sound the low hum of a distant tractor and the occasional cluck from Mrs. Rodriguez's chickens down the road. Then I climbed onto the tractor, slow and deliberate, feeling the familiar creak of the seat under me. I turned the key, and the engine roared to life, a deep, throaty growl that made Greg drop his camera and Linda clutch her clipboard like a shield. I didn't move the tractor, yet, but I shifted it into gear, letting the tires inch forward just enough to kick up a puff of dust. Karen froze, her eyes widening as the massive machine loomed closer to her precious SUV. "You wouldn't." "Dara!" she squealed, her voice cracking with a mix of fear and outrage. "Oh, I don't need to," I said, grinning wide enough to show my teeth. "But this tractor's got a mind of its own, Karen. Been known to roll forward when it's riled up." I let the engine idle, loud and menacing as I leaned back in the seat, one hand resting casually on the wheel. Linda whispered something to Karen, tugging at her sleeve, while Greg backed toward their cars, muttering about not signing up for this. The air was thick with tension, and I could see Karen's mind racing, trying to decide if I was bluffing. I wasn't planning to run her over, obviously, but a little intimidation went a long way with someone used to bullying others into submission. Karen took a step back, her clipboard trembling in her hands. "This is harassment!" she shouted, but her voice lacked its usual bite. "We'll see you in court!" I shrugged, revving the engine just enough to make the tractor lurch another inch. "You're on my land, Karen. Might want to rethink your strategy." Linda and Greg were already retreating to their cars, and after one last glare, Karen spun on her heel and stormed off, yelling, "This isn't over!" as she slammed her SUV door. The convoy peeled out, leaving a cloud of dust and a faint whiff of defeat. I cut the engine and hopped down, chuckling to myself. My phone buzzed. Jake, who'd been watching from his truck a quarter-mile away, ready to swoop in with his drone. "That was epic," he texted. "Drone's charged for tomorrow. Karen's gonna lose it when she sees what's next." I grinned, knowing Friday's deadline would bring her back with bigger guns. My tractor was ready, and so was I. Friday morning broke with a fiery sunrise, the kind that sets the horizon ablaze and makes you feel like anything's possible. I was up early, sipping coffee on my porch, the red gate glowing like a beacon in the dawn light. My John Deere tractor sat sentinel beside it, its chipped green paint catching the sun's rays. I knew today was the deadline Karen had set for repainting the gate, and after yesterday's tractor stunt, I had a feeling she'd come back with something bigger. Sure enough, at 8 a.m. sharp, the rumble of engines echoed down Willow Creek Road. I stepped outside, squinting, and saw Karen's pristine white SUV leading a bizarre entourage, a tow truck with Big Al's towing painted on the side, and a sheriff's cruiser trailing behind. My heart sank for a split second. Had she actually called the law over a gate? Karen stepped out of her SUV, her khaki capris pressed to perfection, her clipboard now replaced by a thick manila folder stuffed with papers. She looked smug, like she'd already won. Behind her, a burly tow truck driver in a stained t-shirt climbed out, hooking his thumbs in his belt loops, while Deputy Tom, a lanky guy I'd known since high school, emerged from the cruiser looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. Tom and I had played football together back in the day, and I could tell by the way he avoided eye contact that he was embarrassed to be here. Karen marched toward my gate, her heels clicking on the gravel, and thrust a new violation notice at me. "This is your final warning," she declared, her voice dripping with triumph. "Repaint that gate by noon, or we're towing your tractor for obstructing access to a public thoroughfare." I glanced at the tractor, parked squarely on my property, not blocking a damn thing. Then I looked at Tom, who was scratching the back of his neck, his deputy hat tilted awkwardly. "She says your gate's a public nuisance," he muttered, almost apologetically. "I'm just here to keep the peace." I couldn't help but chuckle. A public nuisance? My gate was 50 feet from the road, on a private drive that only led to my ranch. Karen was grasping at straws and everyone knew it. The commotion had drawn a crowd. Neighbors started gathering along the road, Mrs. Rodriguez with her teenage son, Old Man Jenkins leaning on his cane, and the Millers, who'd driven over in their golf cart. Phones were out, recording every second of this circus. Jake pulled. Up in his pickup, his drone already buzzing overhead like a high-tech vulture circling for the kill. I'd told him to be ready, and he'd come through, his camera capturing every angle for my YouTube channel. This was about to be the showdown of the century. I climbed onto the tractor, slow and deliberate, letting the creak of the seat and the jingle of my keys set the stage. "Karen," I said, my voice calm, but loud enough for the crowd to hear. "You're on my land. My gate's legal, my tractor's legal, and you've got no business here. Leave, or this old girl might just roll forward a bit." I turned the key, and the engine roared to life, a deep, guttural sound that made the tow truck driver take a step back. I shifted into gear, nudging the tractor an inch toward Karen's SUV, the tires crunching gravel menacingly. Her face went pale, her manila folder trembling in her hands. "You're insane!" she shrieked, stumbling backward. "You can't threaten me!" "No threats," I said, grinning. "Just a tractor with a mind of its own." The crowd was buzzing now, some cheering, others gasping. Mrs. Rodriguez yelled, "Get her, cowboy!" and Old Man Jenkins let out a whoop. Jake's drone swooped low, catching Karen's panicked expression in glorious 4K. The tow truck driver, clearly not paid enough for this, muttered something to Tom and climbed back into his cab. Tom stepped forward, raising a hand. "Karen," he said, barely hiding a smirk. "He's within his rights. The tractor's on his property, and the gate's not blocking anything. You've got no grounds to tow." Karen's face twisted into a mask of fury and humiliation. "This is outrageous!" she screamed, her voice cracking. "You're all conspiring against me." She spun toward the crowd, pointing at them like a prosecutor in a bad courtroom drama. "You'll regret supporting this rebel." But the neighbors weren't buying it. Someone, probably Jake, started chanting, "Red gate, red gate!" and others joined in. Karen flung her folder into her SUV, slammed the door and peeled out, kicking up a cloud of dust that made everyone cough. The tow truck followed, and Tom tipped his hat to me, muttering, "Good luck, man," before driving off. The crowd erupted in cheers, phone still recording as Jake landed his drone. "That's going viral," he said, high-fiving me. Karen's defeat was complete. For now. By Saturday morning, the dust from Karen's dramatic exit had barely settled, but the ripples of our showdown were spreading faster than a prairie fire. Jake's drone footage, uploaded to my YouTube channel under the title HOA Karen vs. The Red Gate, Tractor Takedown, was a hit. By noon, it had racked up 15,000 views, with comments pouring in from my small but loyal audience of ranchers, DIY enthusiasts, and folks who just loved a good underdog story. "Karen got karma," one viewer wrote. Another commented, "Red Gate forever, paint the barn next." I grinned as I read them, sipping coffee on my porch while my crimson gate gleamed in the sunlight. The video wasn't just a viral moment, it was proof that standing up to a bully could inspire others. My subscriber count ticked up by a few hundred, and I knew this was only the beginning. The neighborhood was buzzing with a new energy. Mrs. Rodriguez, emboldened by my defiance, painted her mailbox a bright turquoise, defying the HOA's neutral. Tones only rule. Old Man Jenkins, who'd been fined for his wildflower garden, doubled down by planting a row of sunflowers along his fence, their yellow petals practically screaming rebellion. The Millers, still stinging from Karen's mailbox crusade, swapped their standard box for one shaped like a miniature windmill, painted, you guessed it, red. It was like my gate had cracked open a dam, and now color and creativity were flooding our quiet rural community. Every time I drove down Willow Creek Road, I saw signs of neighbors reclaiming their freedom, one bold choice at a time. Karen, meanwhile, wasn't ready to wave the white flag. She called one last-ditch HOA meeting the following Tuesday, hoping to push through stricter bylaws to prevent future aesthetic atrocities. I got wind of it from Jake, who'd heard it from Linda, the HOA treasurer, who was starting to waver under Karen's iron grip. I rallied the troops, texting Mrs. Rodriguez, the Millers, and anyone else who'd cheered during the showdown. When I walked into the community center, I nearly laughed out loud. Half the room, 15 neighbors strong, showed up wearing red shirts, hats, or bandanas, a silent but unmistakable middle finger to Karen's beige empire. Mrs. Rodriguez even brought a red feather boa, draping it over her chair like a battle standard. Old Man Jenkins, grinning ear to ear, wore a red baseball cap with "Make Fences Great Again" scrawled on it in marker. Karen stood at her podium, her face a mix of fury and desperation as she tried to pitch her new rules. "We need order," she insisted, her voice shrill. "Without strict guidelines, this community will descend into chaos." But the crowd wasn't having it. Mrs. Rodriguez stood up, boa swaying, and said, "Karen, maybe you should focus on fixing the potholes on my street instead of policing our paint cans." The room broke into applause, and even Linda clapped before catching herself. When the vote came, Karen's proposed bylaws were shot down 12-3, with Greg, the nervous board member, abstaining entirely. Whispers started circulating that Karen might step down as HOA president, her authority crumbling like a dry biscuit. She left the meeting without a word, her SUV's taillights fading into the night. A few days later, I got a call from Deputy Tom while I was out checking my fence posts. "Thought you'd want to know," he said, chuckling. "I looked into those HOA bylaws for you. Turns out, they don't even cover gate colors on private ranches like yours." Karen was bluffing the whole time. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my hammer. All her notices, her threats, her tow truck stunt. It was a power trip built on hot air. I thanked Tom, who added, "Keep that gate red, man. It's a damn good look." Emboldened, I decided to double down. I painted my mailbox red to match the gate, a shiny cherry on top of my rebellion. Then I started sketching plans for a mural on my barn, a massive red rooster, wings spread, crowing at the sunrise. I could already picture Karen's face if she ever drove by and saw it. My YouTube channel was thriving, with viewers begging for updates. "Show us the barn mural," one comment read. "Karen comeback video when?" asked another. I started filming a new series, Ranch Life, The Red Gate Chronicles, blending my usual tractor tips with updates on the HOA saga. Jake, ever the hype man, suggested we sell Red Gate Forever t-shirts, with proceeds going to fix those potholes Karen ignored. Karen hasn't been seen on Willow Creek Road since the showdown. Rumor has it, she's taken to driving the long way around to avoid my gate, which suits me just fine. My ranch, my rules. The tractor still sits by the gate, ready for action, though I doubt she'll try me again. This wasn't just about a gate. It was about standing up to someone who thought they could control everyone else's life. My neighbors are bolder now, planting wildflowers and painting fences without fear. As for me, I'm planning that rooster, mural, and my YouTube audience is eating it up. If Karen ever comes back, my tractor's ready, and so's my camera.